Triplets stood in court to defend their mom lying in the hospital against their own father. And what the judge revealed shocked everyone. I still remember the way the morning air smelled when we ran from the hospital to the courthouse, a mix of wet earth and burning firewood from the village kitchens, as if the world itself was holding its breath for what was about to happen. Our feet pounded against the dusty road, our breaths coming in short bursts, our hearts already heavy with fear. We were three, born together, raised together, and now standing together for the one person who had never let us down, our mother. She was lying in a hospital bed with tubes in her arms, her breathing shallow, her body weak from weeks of worry and stress. And the man who caused it all, the man who had once called her wife and called us his children, was now the one trying to destroy everything she had left. He had filed a case to take the land that our grandfather had given her, accusing her of fraud, claiming she had no right to it, as if she was a stranger. The land was our home, our last piece of security, the only thing that tied us to our roots. If he won, we would lose not just the land, but the house, the memories, the place where we learned to walk, where we buried our grandmother under the old tree. We would lose everything. As we reached the courthouse, we stopped to catch our breath. People had already gathered, whispering, curious to see how this strange case would unfold. 3 young people against a powerful man with money, connections, and a lawyer with a reputation for tearing apart opponents. We walked inside, clutching the one thing that gave us hope, an old letter we had found the night before, hidden in our mother's chest. The paper was yellow and fragile, but the ink was still clear, and the name at the bottom still bold. It was a letter from our grandfather, stating in simple words that the land belonged to our mother, signed by the village chief as witness. When we first saw it, our hearts had stopped, because the name of the witness, the village chief back then, was the same as the judge who would hear our case today. We could barely sleep all night, wondering if this was fate, wondering if this judge would see the truth and finally give us justice. Inside the courtroom, our father stood at the front, tall and calm, leaning on his cane like a king waiting to be entertained. He wore a dark agbada that made him look even more powerful, and when he saw us, he smiled a slow, cruel smile. Beside him, his lawyer adjusted his glasses and smirked as if the case was already won. "Where is your lawyer?" the man sneered. "Or are you here to play children's games?" My brother, the tallest of us, clenched his fists but said nothing. My sister stepped forward and said in a voice that was surprisingly steady, "Our mother cannot be here. She is in the hospital." "We will speak for her." The lawyer chuckled, clearly amused. "Very well," he said, turning to the judge. "Let us get this over with. The sooner we prove this woman's lies, the sooner this land can return to its rightful owner." The judge, an older man with a lined face and calm eyes, nodded and gestured for us to begin. My hands trembled as I stepped forward and presented the letter. He took it, adjusted his glasses, and read it slowly, his face unreadable. When he reached the signature at the bottom, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes, recognition, maybe even pain, but it was gone as quickly as it came. He placed the paper on the table and folded his hands. Before we could say more, Father's lawyer jumped up. "This is nonsense," he said sharply. "This so-called letter is nothing but a fabrication. I demand that it be thrown out as evidence." The judge did not answer immediately. He looked at us for a long moment, then said quietly, "The court will examine the authenticity of the letter. For now, we proceed." Then the witnesses were called, 2 men from the village, both of whom we had known since childhood. They stood and swore to tell the truth, and then began to lie through their teeth. "That land has always belonged to the man standing there," one of them said, pointing at Father. "He bought it many years ago before he even married the woman." The second man nodded and added, "I was there when she signed the papers to give it to him." She agreed freely. My stomach twisted. It wasn't true. We knew it wasn't true. I glanced at my brother, who was gripping the edge of the bench so hard his knuckles were white. When the witnesses were dismissed, the judge announced a short recess. We hurried outside, desperate. We found one of the witnesses behind the court, leaning against the wall, drinking water from a plastic bottle. We begged him to tell the truth, tears streaming down my sister's face. At first, he shook his head, but then he looked around to make sure no one was listening and whispered, "Yes, your mother owned that land. Your father tricked her. He brought me and the other man to sign as witnesses when she had just given birth to you three. She could barely walk, and she was crying. But he told her it was just for safekeeping, that he would give it back later. She didn't know he was taking it forever." My heart pounded. "Please say this in court," I begged. He shook his head violently. "I cannot," he said. "If I speak against your father, I will lose everything. He will ruin me." My sister quickly pulled out her phone. "Then just say it here," she pleaded. "We will record you." He hesitated, then nodded. He spoke again, his voice trembling, and we recorded everything, every word that proved our father had lied. When he was done, my sister thanked him, clutching the phone like it was made of gold. And then a shadow fell over us. Slowly we turned around. Father was standing there, his face dark, his jaw tight. He stepped forward without a word, grabbed the phone from my sister's hand, and before we could stop him, he smashed it against the wall, shattering it into pieces. The screen cracked, the battery fell out, and our only proof was gone. My sister screamed, dropping to her knees to gather the broken pieces. But Father just turned and walked away, his cane tapping against the concrete like a death knell. We stood there in silence for a long moment, our hearts sinking. "What do we do now?" my sister whispered. My brother put his arm around her, but his own face was pale. "We go back in," he said. "We fight with what we have left." We walked back into the courtroom, our legs heavy. The judge returned, and everyone took their seats. Before the lawyer could speak, the judge raised his hand. "Clear the courtroom," he said suddenly. Everyone froze. "I said clear the courtroom," he repeated, louder this time. The bailiff quickly ushered everyone out until only we remained. The three of us, our father, his lawyer, and the judge. The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. The judge slowly removed his glasses and set them down. Then he looked at us for a long moment and said, "You do not know this, but your mother and I were to be married once, long before your father came into her life." My breath caught in my throat. "What?" my sister whispered. The judge's eyes were far away, as though he was looking back into the past. "I loved her," he said simply. "But I was a poor man then, with nothing to offer her. Your father came, promising her a better life. She chose him, and I let her go. But after their wedding, I heard the rumors. I heard how he made her sign those papers, how he took everything from her. I wanted to speak up, but I stayed silent. I told myself it was not my place. That was my sin." He stood slowly, his robe rustling. "I cannot stay silent any longer. Go home today. Prepare yourselves. Tomorrow everything will change." We left the courtroom in silence, the judge's words ringing in our ears. For the first time since this nightmare began, we felt a small spark of hope, but it was fragile, like a candle in the wind. Outside, the villagers were waiting, trying to ask what had happened, but we kept walking, heads down, our minds racing. When we reached the hospital, the smell of disinfectant hit us before we even reached Mother's room. A nurse met us at the door, her face tight. "You must be strong," she said softly. My heart dropped. We rushed inside and found Mother lying pale and exhausted, sweat glistening on her forehead. She smiled faintly when she saw us, but her hand was cold when I took it. "Did you tell the truth?" she asked in a whisper. My sister nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "We did. The judge, he said tomorrow everything will change." Mother closed her eyes and sighed. "Then I can rest now," she whispered. For a moment I panicked, thinking she meant forever, but her breathing steadied and she drifted into sleep. That night was the longest of our lives. We sat by her bed watching the machines beep, praying silently that she would survive to see justice done. At dawn, just as the first light of morning slipped through the curtains, we heard commotion in the hallway. Father's men had come. They were shouting at the nurses, waving papers. "Discharge her now!" one of them barked. "The court must see her in person." We ran into the hall, blocking their path. "She's too weak," my brother shouted. "If you move her, she could die!" They ignored him and pushed past, barging into the room. One of them grabbed the bed and started wheeling it out. Mother woke up terrified, clutching at the sheets. "Please stop!" she cried weakly. The nurses tried to intervene, but Father's men were stronger. They wheeled her through the hospital out into the courtyard, where the sun was already blazing hot. The heat and the movement were too much for her. Halfway to the waiting car, she suddenly gasped and collapsed, her head falling to the side. We screamed. The men froze. Nurses rushed forward, shouting for help. Someone started chest compressions right there in the dirt. For a few terrible seconds, I thought she was gone. Finally, she coughed, weak but alive, and they rushed her back inside. When we reached the court later that morning, we were late, our clothes covered in dust, our faces streaked with tears. Father was already inside, standing tall, his lawyer ready. The other side seems to have forgotten the value of punctuality, the lawyer said coldly. The judge ignored him. Are you ready? He asked us quietly. We nodded, even though our legs were shaking. The trial began again. Father's lawyer launched into a furious speech, claiming we were lying, that we had fabricated the letter, that we had no proof. They are desperate children, trying to hold on to something that never belonged to them, he said, his voice echoing in the courtroom. Do not let their tears distract you from the law. When it was our turn to speak, my sister stepped forward. Her voice was hoarse from crying, but steady. She told the court everything. How Father's men had dragged our mother out of the hospital, how she had almost died, how he had smashed our phone when we tried to record the truth. The villagers began to murmur angrily. Some of them nodded, whispering that they had seen the men at the hospital that morning. Father shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Then, before anyone could speak again, the judge rose to his feet. The room went silent. I will speak now, he said, his voice heavy. For years I have stayed silent. No longer. He told the whole story, how he had known our mother before Father ever came into her life, how he had seen her suffer, how he had kept copies of the original land documents locked away, waiting for the day they would be needed. Gasps filled the courtroom. Father's face turned white. You have no right, he shouted suddenly, his voice shaking with rage. You were nothing to her. She chose me. The judge turned slowly to face him. She chose you because you promised to care for her, he said coldly. Instead, you made her life a prison. Today, that ends. Father's lawyer tried to protest, but the judge banged his gavel so hard the sound echoed off the walls. Sit down, he thundered. This court will hear the truth, even if it costs me everything. He called for the clerk, who brought out a small wooden box. Inside were several papers, yellowed with age but clearly preserved. The judge laid them on the table one by one. Here is the original deed to the land, he said. Here is the letter from her father. Here are the signatures of the witnesses. All prove that the land belonged to her before she ever married this man. Father's lawyer stammered, unable to speak. The villagers craned their necks to see, whispering among themselves. At that moment, something inside Father seemed to break. His shoulders slumped and he sank into his chair. For the first time, he looked small. It was mine, he muttered almost to himself. I worked it. I built that house. It should be mine. My brother stood up, anger flashing in his eyes. You built it on her pain, he said. You built it by stealing from the woman who trusted you. And you call yourself a man? Father's face twisted with rage, but he had no answer. The judge looked at him with disgust. You will remain silent, he said. Then he turned to us. Do you have anything else to say before I give my judgment? I stepped forward, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. Yes, I said. I want to say that my mother taught us to forgive. She told us never to fight hatred with hatred. All we ever wanted was our home back. We don't want revenge. We just want to be left in peace. The judge nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. Then peace is what you shall have, he said. He struck the gavel, the sound ringing like thunder. This court rules in favor of the woman. The land is hers. All accusations against her are dismissed. The room erupted. Some villagers cheered, others gasped. Father stood, his face dark with anger, but then something unexpected happened. He dropped his cane. It clattered to the floor, and he stood there staring at it, as if seeing himself for the first time. Then he turned and walked out of the courtroom without a word, leaving the cane behind. When we stepped out of the courtroom that afternoon, the sky was dark with approaching rain. But for the first time in weeks, the air felt light. The villagers surrounded us, some clapping our shoulders, others shaking their heads in shame that they had believed Father's lies for so long. We barely heard them. Our minds were already on Mother, who still lay in the hospital. We ran all the way there, not caring about the dust or the rain that had started to fall in heavy drops. When we reached her room, she was awake, her eyes bright despite her weakness. She looked at us and smiled, a real smile this time, the kind we hadn't seen in months. "You won," she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. We rushed to her side, hugging her gently so as not to hurt her. "Yes, Mama," my sister said. "The land is ours again. You can rest now, truly rest." Mother closed her eyes and let out a long breath, as if she had been holding it all this time. For the next few weeks, things slowly returned to normal. We repaired the house that had been neglected for so long, cleared the weeds from the farm, and repainted the walls until it felt like home again. The villagers came to help, some out of guilt, some out of respect. Even the witness who had lied came one evening to apologize. "I was afraid of your father," he said quietly, standing just outside the gate. "But I am proud of you children. You were braver than all of us. We forgave him because Mother asked us to, and because we understood what fear can do to a man." Then one evening, as the sun was setting, we heard the sound of footsteps on the path leading to our house. When we looked up, Father was standing there. For a long moment, none of us moved. He looked thinner, older, as if the fight had drained the life out of him. He took off his hat and held it in his hands. "I came to see her," he said quietly. We hesitated, then stepped aside. Mother was sitting on the veranda, wrapped in a shawl. When she saw him, her face was unreadable. He walked slowly toward her, his cane nowhere to be seen. "You look better," he said softly. "Stronger." Mother said nothing, just looked at him with eyes that held years of pain and memories. Finally, she said, "Why are you here?" He swallowed hard, his voice trembling when he spoke again. "I came to say I am sorry." The words hung in the air like something fragile. "I was wrong," he continued. "I let greed guide me. I told myself I was protecting what was mine, but I was really just afraid. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of being left with nothing. I hurt you. I hurt our children, and I cannot take that back." My chest tightened. I had never heard him speak like this before, never seen him so small. For a moment, I almost wanted to forgive him right there. But then I remembered the nights we had gone to bed hungry because he had taken all the money, the times Mother had cried silently in the kitchen, the day he smashed our only proof against the wall without a second thought. Forgiveness, I realized, was not mine to give. Mother's voice was calm when she answered. "I have already forgiven you," she said. Father looked shocked. "You have?" She nodded. "Not because you deserve it," she added softly, "but because I cannot carry that bitterness anymore. It was killing me." She took a deep breath. "But forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. You must live with what you have done. You must make peace with yourself." Father's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time I saw him cry. He dropped to his knees on the dusty ground. "Tell them I'm sorry," he said, looking at us. "Tell them I am still their father, even if they hate me." My brother stepped forward, his jaw tight. "We don't hate you," he said slowly, "but you need to stay away until you have truly changed. If you want to be our father again, you must earn it." Father nodded slowly, as if the words cut him but also freed him. He stood, put on his hat, and turned to leave. As he walked away down the path, the sky turned golden with the last light of evening. Mother sighed, leaning back in her chair. "It is over now," she said softly. But I knew it was not really over. Not yet. Healing takes time, and so does rebuilding trust. Months later, on the day of the harvest festival, Father returned. This time he did not come empty-handed. He brought tools, sacks of seed, and a group of young men to help us work the farm. "I want to help," he said simply. And for the first time, Mother smiled at him. Not with bitterness, not with pain, but with something that looked almost like hope. The villagers watched, whispering among themselves, but no one said anything. Perhaps they too understood that sometimes a man must lose everything before he can truly see what matters. That night, As we sat under the stars, my sister said quietly, "Do you think he will ever be the man Mama thought she was marrying?" I looked at the sky, at the moon shining bright and full. "Maybe," I said. "But even if he doesn't, we will be okay. We stood together, and we won. That is what matters." My brother nodded. "And we will keep standing together," he said. "For her. For us." Mother reached for our hands, her eyes glistening in the firelight. "Remember this," she said softly. "Truth may hide, but it never dies. It waits, patiently, for the day someone is brave enough to bring it to light. You were brave, all of you. Never forget that." We sat there in silence, holding hands, the sound of the crickets filling the night. For the first time, the pain felt far away, like a bad dream finally fading. We had fought for our mother, for our home, and for the truth. And in the end, that truth had set us free.